The teacups were still warm. The almond cookies I'd baked the night before sat untouched on the porcelain plate. It was exactly 7 p.m., the time Daniel always came home. But that evening, the door never opened. I remember sitting there far too long, staring at the entrance like the sheer force of waiting could summon him back. But all that filled the room was silence. The kind of silence that clings to your skin when something in your world has quietly died. My name is Elena Ward, and for 14 years, I believed I was living the kind of marriage people envied. Daniel was calm, accomplished, and unshakably composed, the sort of man who made everyone else in the room feel steadier just by existing. He never raised his voice. He was never late. He brought me flowers on Sundays and left handwritten notes on the kitchen counter on mornings he left early. We didn't have children. Life just flowed in its careful rhythm, as if we were 2 pages from the same book. But I didn't know then that the story I thought we were writing together had entire chapters missing, chapters he had written without me. Daniel died on a Thursday. They said it was a heart attack. The doctor's face, gentle, rehearsed, distant, keeps replaying in my head even now. Massive myocardial infarction, he said. He went quickly. I nodded as though understanding made it matter less. It didn't. The funeral was a blur, black clothing, condolences that all sounded the same. Faces I'd never seen before telling me how wonderful my husband had been. I held on to my best friend Claire, who kept pressing bottles of water into my hand that I never drank. I couldn't. And then my younger sister Renee arrived. She hugged me too long. Her perfume, sweet and invasive, wrapped around me like a warning I couldn't name. "I'm so sorry, Lena," she whispered, her voice smooth and measured. Daniel was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But there was something in her eyes that didn't match the words coming out of her mouth. Later that night, she poured herself a drink in my kitchen, acting like she belonged there. Then she said, too casually, "I know it's not the time, but Daniel loaned me some money a while back. I thought maybe we could settle that now that, everything's in your hands." I blinked. "What money?" Renee smiled faintly. "Oh, he didn't mention it? Funny." Something twisted in my chest. I didn't respond. I just nodded because grief makes you too tired to fight. That night I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house like a ghost. Every corner whispered a memory. The books he arranged alphabetically, the framed photo from our honeymoon, the untouched teacups. I stopped at the hallway table. His keys were still there. One key caught my eye, the one Daniel always told me never to use. It was oddly shaped, heavier, darker than the rest. I'd asked him about it once years ago. He smiled then, that easy smile I thought meant safety. "Nothing interesting, love. Just my tools. Grease and noise. You wouldn't like it." I never pressed further. That was our marriage, peaceful, predictable, built on small silences I convinced myself were trust. But that night I realized those silences were walls, and behind them, something waited. The next morning, I drove to the place I'd only heard him mention once, his garage. It sat at the edge of an old industrial park, surrounded by rusting fences and weeds tall enough to hide secrets. The sign above the door had faded letters I could barely read. The metal door groaned as I unlocked it with that forbidden key. For a moment I hesitated, hand trembling on the handle. The air smelled like dust and oil when I pushed it open, and then my breath stopped. It wasn't a garage, it was a shrine. The walls were completely covered with photographs, letters, maps, an entire timeline pinned up like a web only he understood. In every picture, there was Daniel, but not the Daniel I knew. In these photos, he looked younger, freer, jeans instead of suits, scruffy hair, an open smile that felt foreign to me. And beside him, always, the same woman. She was beautiful, dark hair, bright eyes, a kind of effortless confidence that made her glow. In some photos, they were on a beach, others in a mountain cabin, one in front of a cafe. In every single one, they looked like a couple in love. I walked closer. One of the photos had writing on the back, his handwriting. Isabella and Lucas, August 2023. The date hit me like a punch. On that same day, I'd been home cooking his favorite meal, waiting for him to return from a client meeting. My knees gave out. I gripped the edge of a metal desk for balance. That's when I saw the papers, folders, bank statements, tax forms, letters with company names I'd never seen. And on top of the stack, a medical report, Crescent Heart Institute. The date, 2 months before his death. Daniel Ward, ischemic heart disease, stage 3, high risk of cardiac arrest. He knew he was dying. He had time to tell me, to prepare me. Instead, he spent his final days living another life, with her, and the young man in the photos, Lucas, her son, his son. My vision blurred, the world tilted. 15 years together, and I didn't even know who I'd buried. I stood there, staring at the wall of lies until I heard it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. A man stepped into the doorway. Late 20s, tall, dark hair, and those eyes, God, those eyes. The same steady gaze as Daniel's. "You're Elena Ward," he said quietly. I couldn't speak. "I thought you might come here," he continued. "My name's Lucas Meyer. Daniel Ward was my father." My heart stopped. I didn't remember what I said first, maybe nothing at all. Lucas took a step forward, careful, respectful. He looked like someone who had come to make peace with ghosts. "You're really his son?" I finally managed. He nodded once. "Yes, and I'm sorry. You weren't supposed to find out this way." "How long have you known about me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "My whole life," he said simply. "He told me he was married, that you didn't know about me. My mother, Isabella, respected that. She never wanted to interfere. But after she passed away last year, things changed." Passed away. The word echoed through the air. She was gone too. "Why are you here, Lucas?" I asked. He reached into his jacket and handed me a folded document. "Because of this. My father gave it to me 2 weeks before he died. It's a draft of his will, unofficial but real." I unfolded it with trembling hands. Daniel's handwriting looped across the page. It wasn't notarized, just lines dividing assets, mentions of Lucas, references to a company I'd never heard of, Argent Holdings. Then a final note. "Access to remaining documents secured in office vault. Code linked to personal item gifted to E." I froze. Personal item gifted to E. The sapphire necklace. The one he'd given me the night before he died? That wasn't just a gift. It was a key. I drove home with Lucas in silence, the necklace burning cold against my skin. Claire opened the door before we knocked, took one look at my face, and wordlessly set a mug of tea on the table. Lucas stood awkwardly in the doorway until I nodded him inside. We didn't speak of the photos or the medical file or the way my world had turned inside out. We only spoke of the next step. "His office," Lucas said. He called it a satellite space, 14th floor. There's a painting behind the desk. I glanced up. "You've been there?" He shook his head. "No, but my mother mentioned it once. Said it was the only place he ever looked cornered. We went at first light. Daniel's building looked like a place that didn't like questions. Steel and glass and a lobby that smelled like money. The receptionist barely looked up when Lucas flashed a key card. My name wasn't in any system, his was. I thought about that a little too long. The office was colder than I expected. Gray walls, black desk, one low bookcase with exactly 5 books arranged by height. Not a single photo of me. No framed anything. Only an abstract painting in washed-out blues. Lucas moved behind the desk, testing the frame with careful fingers. It clicked. A small safe revealed itself like a trick ending I should have seen coming. I unclasped the necklace. The pendant was heavier than it looked, the sapphire a shade too dark to be innocent. A seam along the back gave when I pressed it with my thumbnail. A wafer-thin metal plate slid out, etched with numbers so tiny I had to tilt it to the window to read them. Lucas fed it into a narrow slot on the safe's keypad. The screen blinked and a low chime sounded as the door unsealed. Inside, precision. Stacks of documents, a black flash drive, a small wooden box, and a single silver key on a tag that read Federal Trust, Box 3179. The papers were a map of wrongdoing with the neatness of a ledger. Shell corporations, wires, escrow agreements under names that couldn't survive a second glare. Argent Holdings showed up everywhere like a watermark he thought I'd never see. I opened the wooden box. A ring lay nestled in velvet. Simple gold, small diamond, worn smooth by time. Not mine. The inscription inside read, I, always. My breath faltered. Isabella. Claire's hand found my shoulder. She didn't say I'm sorry because what could those words do in a room like this? Lucas lifted a folded letter addressed in Daniel's careful script. Do you want... I nodded. He handed it to me. Elena, it began. If you're reading this, I failed you. I should have said the hard things while there was still time. I built 2 lives because I was too weak to choose and too afraid to lose. I have no defense beyond love in the wrong direction. It wasn't an apology so much as a confession of someone who knew the fire would spread and kept striking matches anyway. He went on to say he'd left records, safeguards, and access. Use them as you see fit. Burn them or bury them, or turn them into light. He signed only his first name, as if intimacy could stand in for honesty. We left the building with a folder in my bag, a key in my pocket, and an emptiness I couldn't name. Lucas drove while Claire watched the street in the side mirror, like she expected the past to chase us down. I didn't go home. Home was a museum now. I went to Claire's instead, where the kettle's whistle felt like the only true sound. We spread the documents on her dining table, photographing, scanning, naming files with quiet efficiency. When my hands began to shake, Claire stilled them with her own and said nothing. My phone rang that evening from an unknown number. Elena Ward, a male voice said, smooth as the lobby we'd just left. This is Garrett Blake. I managed certain international arrangements for your husband. I don't know you, I said. You don't have to. You have something that isn't yours. Then call the police. They're already on our side, he said pleasantly. Let's not waste their time. I suggest we meet. Soon. I'm not meeting anyone. I hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. Another unknown number. Elena? This voice was cooler, precise, like a knife laid flat. Victor Cade, consider me the original investor. I prefer clean exits. A box at Federal Trust. Return it unopened, and we will consider this an accounting error. He didn't ask if we had the key. He already knew. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. Lucas paced the length of the room, jaw tight. Blake called me too, he said. He mentioned Cade without saying his name. Said I was a beneficiary of goodwill and should act accordingly. Translation, Claire muttered. Do as you're told. Or else, I finished. We went to someone who didn't scare easy. Mason Doyle, an estate lawyer who had handled my father's will. He had an office with scuffed floors and a dying ficus that made me trust him immediately. I'm not your confessor, he said after we slid the papers across his desk. I'm your firewall. We'll digitize, duplicate, and distribute. 3 full sets, one here, one with you, one somewhere no one would look. Me, Claire said. I'm no one. Mason's mouth twitched. Perfect. We worked until the sky turned the color of old tin. Mason drafted a letter to Blake, all cool teeth. I added a line at the bottom in my own hand. Try me. EW. It wasn't brave so much as empty of fear, which I'm learning is its own kind of courage. The next morning, we used the silver key. Federal Trust sat discreetly between a boutique law firm and a bakery that smelled like sundaes. The vault manager examined the tag, checked my ID, and said, Box 3179, it's been dormant for years. He led us down into cold air and thick doors. He handed me gloves, standard practice, and left us alone. I slid the box from its slot. No stacks of cash, no passports, just a manila folder and a glossy photograph. In the photo, Daniel, Garrett Blake, and, standing just behind them, shades on, smile faint, Victor Cade. Not strangers, not rivals. A team. Lucas opened the folder. Agreements, ledgers, payoff schedules with eerie neatness. On top, stamped in red, Cade Blake, blackmail insurance. Beneath it, a single line in Daniel's handwriting, if they come for you, use this before they use you. So he knew, I said. He always knew, Lucas answered. We left the bank and went straight to Mason again. He scanned everything, sealed a duplicate set in an envelope with a tamper sticker, and slid it across the desk to me. If anyone so much as breathes in your direction, he said, you drop this in a reporter's lap. I nodded. My hands had stopped shaking. The calls came that evening anyway. Blake first, laughter humming beneath his words. You think papers make you bulletproof? No, I said. They make you flammable. Silence. Then, what do you want? Peace, no calls, no surprises. You touch me or anyone tied to me, and every file finds a home. He gave a small, admiring sound. I underestimated you. Most men do, I said, and ended the call. Cade followed an hour later, voice like frost. You've made a mess of a simple courtesy, Ms. Ward. I'm offering a clean closure. Return the original materials. Keep the sentimental items. What sentimental items? The necklace, he said as if it were nothing. He bought it the day he signed the first transfer. A private joke, blue for cold feet. I hung up without answering. Some truths don't deserve air. We weren't done. There was one more piece we hadn't touched, the flash drive. It sat on Claire's coffee table like a small dark pupil watching everything. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. The truth is, I was afraid that whatever was left to know would finish breaking me in a way that even anger couldn't hold together. 2 days passed before I plugged it in. Claire drew the curtains. Lucas sat forward, elbows on knees as if bracing for impact. A single folder, for Elena. Inside, one video dated 10 days before he died. When Daniel appeared on the screen, I barely recognized him. No suit, no composure. His face drawn, eyes ringed, hair unkempt. The kind of tired that comes from running from your own life. Elena, he said softly, if you're watching this, I didn't get to tell you the truth. Maybe I was never going to. Maybe that's who I am. He rubbed his jaw, looked away, then straight back into the camera. There's someone you trust more than you should. Someone I should have never let near either life. My heart slowed to a deliberate, painful beat. It's Renee, he said. It isn't just an affair. She engineered it. She knew where the money was, who I worked with, what would happen if certain things got out. When I told her I was ending it, when I said Isabella and I were leaving, she changed. She threatened to go public with the accounts, the transfers, everything I'd buried to protect you. He swallowed, eyes shining with a bleak, belated honesty. I can't prove what I'm about to say, but I believe it, and the timing doesn't lie. Isabella had packed her bags. She booked a one-way to Lisbon. The next day, she died. Single car crash. Brakes failed. She'd had them serviced the day before. Renee knew she was pregnant. Isabella didn't. After the funeral, Renee told me we were clean. I should have gone to the police. I didn't. I moved money. I built walls. I left you keys because I didn't know how to save anyone by telling the truth. He leaned closer, voice breaking. I was a coward. You're not. If you stay, don't fight alone. The video ended in a soft click that seemed too gentle for the room it left behind. Nobody moved. The quiet felt like fresh snow hiding an avalanche. Lucas spoke first, voice low. I believe him. Claire nodded once. I stared at the blank screen until my reflection came into focus. The face of a woman with less to lose than she'd thought, and more to live for than a lie. I closed the laptop and stood. Invite her, I said. Renee? Claire asked. To brunch, I said, finding my coat. She thinks I'm broken. Let's let her talk. Lucas's mouth tightened. Are you sure? No, I said truthfully. But I'm done being the one who doesn't know the shape of the room. The next morning, the sky split open into a clean winter blue. Claire set the porch table with lemon cake and 2 sweet tea, Renee's weakness. I wore the sapphire, not as a memory but as a warning. Renee arrived in a dress the color of soft sky, a careful hand smoothing the small curve at her abdomen. She hugged me like a victor being gracious in public. He kicks when I drink orange juice, she said, laughing lightly as she sat. It's like he knows he's winning. I smiled without my eyes. I'm glad you came. I was worried you were angry, she said. About what? I asked, tilting my head. That my husband was your hobby, or that you've confused leverage with love? Her smile cracked at the edge. Elena? I set the flash drive on the table between us. Even in the sunlight, it looked like a shadow. Renee stared at it the way people stare at loaded things. I know, I said. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. Her mouth thinned into a line that was almost a smile. You can't prove anything. You're right, I said softly. I don't have to. Her eyes flicked to the window where Lucas's silhouette crossed and disappeared. She recovered quickly. "You're bluffing." "No," I said, standing. "I'm changing the game." I left her there with the cake she pretended not to want and the tea she pretended not to need, walked inside to where Claire waited, and Lucas stood at the hallway's mouth like a hinge to something harder. "Now what?" Claire asked. "Now," I said, closing my hand around the flash drive, feeling its small, certain weight, we stop reacting. I looked at Lucas. "It's time we use what he left us." "And what's that?" he asked. "Power," I said. "And the truth." Outside, Renee's laughter floated thinly through the door, a sound like glass waiting for the right note to shatter. We didn't go to the police. We didn't go to the press. We went to Mason Doyle one last time. When we arrived, he already had the flash drive duplicated and encrypted in 3 separate storage devices, one for me, one for him, and one mailed under a pseudonym to an investigative journalist in New York. "Insurance," he said simply. "If anything happens, the world learns who Daniel Ward really was and who helped him." I signed the affidavit. Lucas signed his own copy. Claire stood by the door, watching like a soldier at her post. None of us said it aloud, but we all knew. The moment those files left Mason's office, we stopped being victims and became something far more dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. I walked through the rooms, the framed photos, the wedding china, the soft indentation on his pillow, and I realized something I hadn't before. Grief had turned into clarity. The man I thought I knew had left me a labyrinth of betrayal, yes, but also a map. And I intended to follow it to its final turn. The next morning, I met Renee again. I told her I wanted to talk privately. No anger, no lawyers, just closure. She agreed instantly, too eagerly. That alone told me everything. We met at a small cafe near the river. She arrived looking polished as always, light blue coat, diamond studs that caught the morning sun. She smiled like this was all behind us. "I'm glad you reached out again," she said. "It means a lot." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the spoon circle. "You always did like happy endings," I murmured. "Tell me, Renee, did you ever think about what you were doing, about Isabella, about Daniel?" Her smile didn't falter. "Elena, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. He was lonely. I was desperate?" I interrupted softly. "Or strategic?" She blinked. "You're angry. I understand." "No, you don't," I said, leaning forward. "Angry is what I was when I thought you just slept with him. But now I know you destroyed lives to get what you wanted." Her hand froze around her cup. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I slid my phone across the table. The video paused on Daniel's face mid-sentence. Her breath hitched before she could mask it. "You watched it," she whispered. "Yes," I said. And I believed him. For the first time, the mask slipped. I saw a flicker of calculation behind her eyes, then fear, faint but there. "You don't know what you've done," she hissed. "You think you can play with fire and not get burned?" "I'm not playing," I said quietly. "I'm ending this." Her voice dropped lower. "You have no proof." I smiled just slightly. "Maybe not, but I don't need proof when I have publicity." Renee's face paled. She knew what I meant. The files, the backups, the press. "You wouldn't," she said. "I would," I replied. "Because I've already lost everything. And when someone has nothing left to lose, Renee, they don't bluff." I stood, leaving a small envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of her signed non-disclosure agreement from Daniel's company, something Mason had found buried in his records. It was enough to tether her silence. She didn't chase me when I walked out. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. 2 days later, Garrett Blake called again, but this time his voice was different. Less steel, more calculation. "You've made your point," he said. "The files? The leverage? What do you want?" "Nothing," I answered. "You'll stop contacting me, Lucas, and anyone connected to this. You'll dissolve Argent Holdings within 30 days. If you don't, the story breaks worldwide." He hesitated. "And if I agree?" "Then you disappear quietly," I said. "And I never hear your name again." He exhaled through his nose. "You sound like him." "Maybe that's why I won." I hung up before he could reply. That night, I met Lucas on Claire's porch. The sunset spilled over the trees, painting everything gold, like the world had decided to forgive us a little. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo, me, Daniel, and him as a small boy standing near the edge of some nameless lake. I didn't even remember it being taken. He kept it, Lucas said. My mother found it in his old wallet years ago. I think he wanted you to have it. I studied the picture, the way Daniel's hand rested on my shoulder, the unguarded smile on his face. For the first time, I could see the man beneath the lies, the human part that broke under the weight of his own secrets. He loved you both, I said quietly. Lucas nodded. Maybe that's why he destroyed himself trying to keep it all separate. We sat in silence until the light faded. Then he said, "What will you do now?" I looked toward the horizon where the last streak of orange was sinking into the hills. "Start over," I said, "but this time it's my story." 1 month later, Charleston felt like someone else's dream. I sold the house. Every room was staged and spotless, like it had never belonged to me. Claire cried when I handed her the keys to my car. Lucas hugged me at the airport, his eyes bright but steady. "You could stay," he said. "I could," I replied, "but I won't." He smiled faintly. "You're stronger than he ever was." I had to be. The flight to Colorado was quiet. No tears, just a kind of stillness that felt earned. I rented a small cottage near the mountains, a place with peeling paint, creaking floors, and more sunlight than I knew what to do with. I unpacked only one box, a few clothes, a book of recipes, and the photo of Daniel, Lucas, and me. I didn't hang it up. I placed it in a drawer. Some stories don't need to be displayed to be remembered. For the first few nights, I woke at 7 p.m., the hour he used to come home, listening for the turn of a key that would never come. But the silence no longer scared me. It just reminded me that peace can sound like nothing at all. On the third evening, I walked to the edge of the property. The sun had dipped behind the ridge and the air smelled like rain. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the affairs, the money, the death, and realized that somewhere between losing him and finding the truth, I'd found something else. Freedom. I took off the sapphire necklace. For a long moment, I held it against the fading light, watching it catch the last gold of sunset. Then I let it drop into the river below. It flashed once before sinking out of sight. "Goodbye, Daniel," I whispered. Behind me, the mountain stood quiet and unbothered. Ahead, a new life waited, blank as an unwritten page. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to start writing again.